Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Virtue Signal. I'm Bill Whittle with my friend and colleague Alfonso Rachel, and we are here to talk about some of the fundamental principles underlying today's politics. And Zoe, today I've got a topic for you. Today I want to talk about money. I don't mean about,
Talk to me.
between us. I mean in general. We'll keep that conversation private. I was having a kind of an interaction last night on the Stratosphere Lounge. Just 100 people watch the show live, and I get to interact with the live stream. And I'd like to explore an idea with you because I think this is an important, real important aspect of our society today, and learning how to disarm some of the arguments being used against America today. And here's the discussion, how it went. Assume for a minute, for the sake of the thought experiment, that every single bank account in America was zeroed out. Everybody is broke. Everybody is out on a field. And then everybody gets a check for $500,000. In other words, you have now achieved 100% equality of income. Income equality is gone. No one has any money except for the $500,000, which is a lot of money, that has been given to every single person in the country. And the argument, and I think the point that needs to be really understood is, I said that if you did that, 5 years later, all of the people who are billionaires now would be billionaires again, and all of the people who are broke now would be broke again. And that's got nothing to do with race or even class or anything like that. It's got to do with an understanding of what money is. And when you look at people who come into vast amounts of money, best example, of course, are people who win the lottery. You find that in almost every one of these cases, certainly in an extremely high number of cases, you find people who 5 years later are not only broke again, but they're broke and they don't have any friends anymore. And so I just think that people talk about he's got more money than me or she does or this, but no one ever really talks about what money is and how people should think about it and why some people are rich and why some people aren't.
Man, I wanted to go get my bass, but I'm hooked up with my wires and stuff like that. Go grab my bass and start that bass line, man. Boo-doo, doo-doo, doo-doo. Money, 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 money. Yeah, you know the jam. Okay, so now this is gonna make me think of my high king and priest, man. It's gonna make me think of Jesus, who says, "You will always have the poor." Right? He's speaking to Judas. Judas is your quintessential Democrat. And yes, I can call these people out on these things. People are there, Jesus was not a Republican or Democrat. I beg to differ, but watch. Judas tells Jesus when he's getting anointed by this oil, he says, Judas tells it like, you know what that money could have been spent? That money could have been used to feed the poor. That money and he's making these self-righteous platitudes, right? And Jesus like, pump your brakes, shut up. Basically, what she does with her property, is none of your business, right? Matter of fact, man, you're the one stealing from the treasury. So you're going to try to make like you're all holier than thou and that you're conscious of the poor and all that sort of stuff. Meanwhile, you're the one stealing from the treasury. And he says, you don't care about the poor. You care about filling your own pockets. So all that to say, Bill, we have an institution and we have policies set up where these people who talk about the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. Well, the thing is, you have these policies, the lobbyists and the politicians who are going in and becoming millionaires, right? Who capitalize on the plight of the poor. Meanwhile, they're making the plight of the poor. And they talk about how much they're going to give. We're going to make this stimulus of $5,000 and sort of stuff. We're going to spend this money on COVID and treatment and stuff like that. It's like, no, you're not giving this to us. You're charging us. This is going to cost us.
That's a great example. That's a great example of what I'm talking about when I say people haven't got the faintest idea of money and how money works.
Yes.
They're not giving us the money. They're charging us the money and then handing it back to us after they keep an administrative fee. If somebody had heard the setup that I'd given, if a progressive or a liberal heard the initial setup where I said that if everybody had all their bank accounts zeroed and everybody got the same amount of money in 5 years, the rich people would be rich again and the poor people would be poor again. Without a doubt, a liberal or progressive hears me say that, and they think that I'm either justifying it or somehow in favor of it. I'm not justifying or anything. I'm just explaining the truth of it. But the reason I find this important is because it is not written in stone. This is the thing that is so important to me. If you were to do what we just talked about in that thought experiment, there would be some people, I don't think it'd be a huge percentage, but there certainly would be people who did not have opportunities before, who now have $500,000 or whatever the case may be. And having been poor before, now they would take these resources and do something with it. They'd get an education, they'd start a business. No question that there are a number of people that would do that, but most of them wouldn't. And the reason is, I think, is because people who have money understand there's a difference between spending money and growing money. And this is something that can be taught. I was, not too long ago, it looked like there was going to be like a significant sum of money coming my way. Turned out it didn't happen. But I've never been good with money, ever. And my wife and I were talking on the couch. And instead of talking about all the wonderful things we could buy or all the wonderful things we could do, it's like a lightning bolt for me. It's like, no, how do we grow this box? How do we grow it? How do we continue to grow it? How do we live a good life? We're not going to just grow the box so it can be there when we die. But nevertheless, how do we make this grow and work for us? And no one talks about this. And so money is demonized, but money doesn't care. Money doesn't care. It doesn't care if money goes where the money wants to go. And if it goes into a person's bank account, the money doesn't care if that person's white or black, old or young. It doesn't care and it doesn't know. It just flows. And all of this stuff is stuff that can be learned. And so much, I'm not for an instant saying that there's no difference between the resources available to a poor person and a rich person. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that it is possible to learn a different way of thinking about money and make money your servant instead of your master.
Indeed, man. And just like you said, this with this money flowing, that's why it's called currency. A lot of people, they'll assume that they can save their way into wealth. But when you're just trying to set that money and seeing that, water stagnates, man. It can evaporate right where it stands. You got to make sure that it's flow coming in, a flow going out, and make sure that the flow going out is somehow cyclical to where it can be go into the economy and come back in where you've invested in what it is that you're doing somehow. And there's a lot of nuances to that as well. But like I said, there's a reason why it is called currency. And the Lord himself tells you, it's like, look, because a lot of people, they think about Jesus and no, Jesus was for the poor and all that sort of stuff. It's like, yeah, but Jesus didn't talk about the poor. And when he says, blessed be the poor, what's he going to bless you with? More poverty? No, he expects you to be fruitful. That's what he tells us. The word of God tells you, be fruitful, multiply, produce and reproduce. So, in that, when we have, when he tells us, look, I'm going to give you 1 talent. I'm going to give this person 5 talents. I'm going to give this person 10. When I come back, I expect the person who had 10 talents to increase. The person who 5, I expected to double it. The person who has 1, I expect you to double it. If you don't, and I come back, I'm going to have issues with you. So, we have to look at these things in principle. And when the word of God is telling, I expect you to be innovative. I expect you to get out there and know how the things of the world are doing things, not for the world's means. Not for evil, not for selfishness, but learn how to use their tools. Know what people need. Find a niche and fill it. Make sure that the niche to be filled is not a defiling niche, but use these tools. Get out there and be productive.
Well, as a person who didn't have consistently 4 figures in the bank until I was in my mid-40s, I can tell you with some authority that the single greatest the single worst dynamic in terms of people remaining in poverty goes something like this. I don't have enough money. I'm worried about money all the time. I'm constantly sick, worried about where I'm going to get the money for all these other things. When I say a windfall, I'm not talking about an uncle dying. I'm saying you suddenly make money or something happens. Some money comes in. Maybe you get a welfare check. Maybe you get a check for having solved the problems of cancer. But when a bunch of money, or even a significant little lump of money, comes to somebody who's been poor for a long time, and I'm speaking from experience here, the overwhelming desire is to go out and buy something, is to do something to make you feel like you have made up for the poverty. You've been looking at all of these other things that you can't afford, and when this on the rare occasions when a surplus comes in, the compulsion to spend it and to say things like "I deserve it" is almost overwhelming, and in many cases it is overwhelming. And this is where the problem lies. I think it is a lack of discipline that is often caused by desperation, but now you're stuck in this cycle. And some people are born into this cycle. And by the way, for every story you ever heard of somebody who came to America, like Andrew Carnegie apparently came to America with $24 in his pocket, became the richest man in the world. For every story you have of somebody who started with nothing and then became a millionaire or a billionaire, there are plenty of stories of people who started as millionaires and billionaires and ended up with nothing. Nobody talks about that. But some of these things rise and other things sink. And this understanding of the dynamics, I really like what you said about flow, and that's why they call it currency. People tend to think that money is something beyond their control, but it isn't. And even small amounts of money, if they're applied with the right education and intelligence and discipline and the right attitude, you will find that you will not remain in poverty forever. In fact, on the contrary, if you can really connect your effort and improving yourself with that increased money flow, then you're on your way. Nobody can stop you once you get that lesson in.
Right. And if I can go and to that, if I can go back to when Jesus says that you will always have the poor, you won't always have me. This is an instance of not him making some new statement. This is once again Jesus reminding people of who he's always been, because he was the same guy in the Old Testament who says you will always have the poor. He says, there will never be any poor among you. Never. Right? Now, that's an interesting thing to say, because obviously we have the poor, but he follows that by saying, if you are obedient and you keep my commandments. So we're talking about that discipline, Bill. We're talking about that creativity that the Lord expects us to have and do these things in a certain way that do not intrude upon others, that do not promote problems in the culture with people, what they do with their money. This thing, when people start loving their money and they start doing anything to get it, God's like, yeah, you might not want to do that. And if you refrain these things, there will never be the poor among you. Then after that, he says, the poor will never cease to be among you. Why? Because you guys don't follow my statutes. So now this is Jesus saying, yeah, I was the guy who said that. I'm the one who says you will always have the poor, because you won't always have me. Because in more and more, Bill, we're forsaking him. We're giving over to this idea that, hey, we don't need God. We don't need a standard. We don't need a foundation of this holy being to follow who's written all these laws about us. We don't need him. And more the culture decides on that, the more and more poverty sets in. Spiritually poor, morally poor, financially poor, health poor. All the kinds of poverty sets in because we think that we can do it better than what Jesus taught.
Yeah, we talked about it on our last episode. We'll just do it because we're special and we're not bound by the laws that bound every other generation. We'll just think of a new way to do this, and we're going to throw away 2,000 years of wisdom in history, or 5,000, and billions of lives, and billions of lives that have lived in error and pain. All of those lessons out the window. We'll do better than that. Before we close this one, let's just take a quick look at the other end of the spectrum. There are a lot of behaviors that people are born poor. I understand that. But there are a lot of behaviors that keep people poor. On the other end of the spectrum, there are people who are superb with money, absolutely incredible. And I've known a number of very wealthy people, and they became wealthy because they cared about something other than money. They cared about the case I know the best. The guy was a geologist. He had a better way to do carbon-14 dating, and he started his own company, and he ended up with millions of dollars. But he wasn't out to make millions of dollars. But on the far end of that spectrum is another kind of a pathology, and that's the pathology where all you care about is the flow and the currency. There is no moment when the money is there to serve you, serve your family, serve a greater society. I am as opposed to people coercively taking money from you as I possibly can be. But on the far other end of the spectrum, it is possible to be so obsessed with money, so fascinated with the flow, so addicted to watching those numbers grow, that you really don't ever stop and smell the roses, and you end up dying with a tremendously large bank account, but you find out you never knew your kids or whatever the case may be. That's another kind of a disease, isn't it? Every time we talk about virtue, it seems to me that the defining quality of all the virtues is moderation, right? Just don't hang out at the edges.
Indeed, moderation and knowing what it is that one is going to be moderating with. It's like, because some people can look at something that's really not healthy for them, but they'll say, hey, if I do it in moderation, it's okay. Well, it's having the discernment to say, yeah, that's just a vineyard you may not want to go in at all. Have the moderation to say, hey, I can enjoy moderation of things you enjoy, right? And say that actually that's probably a place that I should not go. But there is this issue of people idolizing money. That's when God says, hey, don't have any other gods before me. That includes money. Yeah. And when people love these things, there's no telling what people won't do to have these things. And it's an interesting thing, Bill, because, when you have, and a lot of these liberals, as much as they try to claim that they want this society where there's no classes and stuff like that, man, they want to get their cheese just as much as anybody else. That's why they go to these colleges and they want to get these high paying jobs. They want to pay high, they want to be loaned high dollar to get a high paying job. And I don't know how they're going to get a high paying job in the course that they're taking that doesn't seem to yield any returns. But that's what they want. They want everything for free. It's like, well, why do you want a high paying job if you want everything for free? But these same liberals will try to invoke Jesus, especially when it comes to the render under Caesar what is Caesar's scripture, which they have no idea what that means. They think that Jesus is saying, yes, pay taxes, because with those taxes, we're going to go to school, you're going to have free healthcare and all that sort of stuff. That is not at all what Jesus was talking about. Jesus says, when they came to challenge him, hey, what do you say about taxes from Caesar? Jesus says, let me see that coin, right? Okay, what does this coin say? And the coin says, worshipful son of the god Augustus. Jesus is calling them out on idolatry, not on taxation. When he says render under Caesar what is Caesar, he's saying you don't owe Caesar anything. You owe God everything because I am the one true God. What you're partaking in is an idolatry, which is a violation of the commandments that I wrote. Do you know who you're talking to? So in one, you're using that money that you're idolizing to pay tribute to a false god. You're offending me on multiple fronts.
Well, just to wrap this up, you mentioned a moment ago about somebody who's, got a degree in, my go-to answer is medieval Italian poetry, right? And they don't know why they're not getting that $250,000 job. And they have $250,000 in debt. And since they come out of college so deep in debt, one of the side effects of this is they're not able to borrow money to start a business. They're in the hole and they have no prospects of getting out of it. But one of the final things I wanted to talk to you about on this is, if we forgive those debts, which is the Democrats' entire party is, here, have some money and vote for me. If we forgive those student debts, not only does it make chumps of people like me who had to pay that student debt back over the course of, I don't know, it was 19 years for me or something, time finally retired, it got all the interest off on it. But more importantly, I think, if you do that, you are depriving the people who owe that money the valuable lesson of the sting of a bad decision. And that seems to be something that's utterly missing today. And another reason why I feel such sympathy for this generation, because since they've never been allowed to fail in anything, they're not allowed to fail in Little League Baseball because they're not keeping score. Since they've never been allowed to fail, they've never been stung. And wisdom comes from being stung. Whatever degree of wisdom I have is because I've lived this long for life to beat the stupid out of me. And if we don't allow life to beat the stupid out of people by making them pay for bad decisions, then they will continue to make bad decisions. And this, by the way, is the California virus in a nutshell. Californians vote to ruin California, and then they move to Texas and they vote like Californians and start to ruin Texas. Yeah. And if they had to stay in California, if they were required by law to stay in California, they would have to face the consequences of these bad decisions that they made. But no, they just walk away from them and then they just pollute the next campsite. So there's a lot to be said for the power and I don't know how else to put it. Well, you've got certainly a biblical reference for it. But there's a lot to be said for the power of pain in terms of making sure that you don't do the same stupid thing again and again and again, which, as the old saw goes, is a great definition of insanity.
Man, you nailed it, Bill. It's like this thing that people have to, it's like, you might really need to feel the pain of what this is like. And it reminds me of the Exodus itself. These people, they wanted to get out of California, and chances are they're going to take these same problems with them. It's like, I think about that myself. It's like, man, if we leave, man, are we going to take that California mindset with us? But here's the thing, in the Exodus, the Israelites were complaining about all this, and they sold themselves into this, right? It got to a point where it's like, okay, we're going to sell ourselves, into being slaves of Egypt. They sold themselves into it under Joseph, right? So in doing so, 400 years later, the oppression just got really bad. Now, through this whole thing, Bill, they never called out for freedom. They never called out for that. They just wanted the oppression to stop. They wanted to be comfortable, right? And so what does God do? He lets Pharaoh go ahead and just have his way with the folks. And then he even gets to a point where it's like, you know what? I'm going to even make Pharaoh have his way with you. I'm going to harden his heart, and he's really going to ramp up the oppression on you. You know why? Because you guys never really asked for freedom. You just wanted to be comfortable slaves. That's what you want. And I need you guys to really understand that. And I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to go ahead and lead you out of Egypt. Now that I really think that you had enough, but you guys never really asked for freedom, did you? And now that you got out of Egypt, what do you want to go do? Oh, Moses, we want to go back to Egypt so we can have free fish. This is the dynamic of people over, just like you said, Bill, over and over and over again. These people, we have too many people, Bill, that want to be comfortable slaves. It's not really freedom that they want.
No. You're going to have to go a long way to find a better example of human nature than the idea that I'm with my family wandering through the desert. There is a pillar of fire at night and a pillar of smoke in the daytime. Food is falling from the sky, and the first thing I want to do is make a golden calf for me to worship. That's as clear an indication of that fault line in the human heart as anything else is. And we talk about these issues that are often difficult issues to talk about because nobody else is talking about them, and they need to be talked about. These kind of things are things that are actually may seem extremely philosophical, but they're not. They're practical things that you can do. You can practically learn steps to not be poor. And one of these self-help books, I guess you call it that, that's kind of a bit of a slur for it, has been around for a long time. I want to say it was Zog Mandino, I think. But he wrote a book called The Richest Man in Babylon. And basically, you could take the entire book and boil it down to, for every 10 shekels that you make, spend 9. And put the other one to work. And it's a tremendous book, gives you a real good idea about money. But having just spent $1,900 billion to bail out New York and California and the National Endowment for the Arts and public broadcasting, and some 8%, 9% goes to COVID-19 relief, and most of that doesn't get to the people either. I think it's about time we started to understand what money is, or at least what it should be, because if they ruin the money supply and are well on their way, people are going to need money after the dollar becomes worthless. And let's try and stop that while we still can.
I heard that, Bill. And I tell you what, man, and getting out of poverty, when it comes to getting out of poverty, sometimes something can hit people so hard, man, and it's hard for them to get back up. We definitely don't. We're not inconsiderate of things like that. No. But there's a lot of people out there, Bill, where there's really not much of an excuse. And a lot of these people are given over to thinking that the government is going to do something for them, or they're going to be given a higher wage if they go to work and all this sort of stuff. And they don't realize that this stuff costs, and it's like this vicious circle that just keeps driving up the cost of things. And they don't seem to understand that. So these are the things that help to keep people poor, whether it's at the pump, they want these policies and stuff like that, that's going to protect the earth and stuff like that. People don't understand that, hey, when you're trying to make ends meet, you can talk about how much you care about the earth and whatever, but that stuff's going to take a back seat.
Right.
And when it comes to, this money that we keep, I saw this interesting, if I can say this really quick, man, I saw this meme. I thought it was pretty funny. Somebody says, cause we're printing this money to get people out of this hole that they're in. And it's like, if we can print money, why are we paying so much? Why are we paying so many taxes? Why doesn't the government just pay themselves with all this money they keep having printed?
Well, this is the lesson I fear that we're going to learn, one way or another. But again, the reason we do these shows is to see if we can head that off, and at the very least to make sure that the people who are paying attention and who do respect the past and these eternal principles, both spiritual and very mundane, that they have some kind of something to chew on. And the very, very last thing I said, I know we're running long here, but this is something I know from personal experience as well. You're going to be hard pressed to find a more miserable person than a third generation trust fund kid. I know it sounds to many people ridiculous, but there's nothing worse in the world than being able to have whatever you want whenever you want it. It is an actual curse. And the biggest problem with government checks is, well, obviously it's dependency, but there's nothing worse in the world, and I'm speaking from experience here, than waiting for money to come to you that is not connected to your effort. It doesn't matter if you work hard or don't work at all. It's going to come on this date, and so between now and 17 days from now, I have absolutely nothing to do except think about what I'm going to do when it gets here and what I'm going to buy and all the rest of it until the next one comes. And it utterly destroys your, and this is the word I'm looking for, your authority, your ability to write your own life. You become a passive, angry, resentful, envious individual, and you feel utterly disconnected from control of your own destiny.
Absolutely, man. And, of course, that's going to remind me of the Lord's Prayer himself when he says, deliver us from temptation. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. That's a strange thing to request from God. Lead us not. Why would God lead us into temptation at all? It's not about leading us into temptation. What it is that I want to bless you, but I'm not going to bless you with something that you don't have the constitution to know how to keep from doing evil with. You're going to ask me, you really want me to bless you. Okay, I'm not going to lead you into the temptation to take the blessing that you want and do evil with it. I will deliver you from evil first. I will deliver you from your own desires if I have to. So I know it's a strange thing to ask God to not lead you to temptation. It's like, no, I'm doing this for your own good. What you want to be blessed with can actually hurt you.
You betcha. Well, that'll do it for this edition of the Virtue Signal. It's always not just informative. It's always fun talking to you, buddy. It's good to see you.
Likewise.
And thanks again to the new members who joined in our December and January new member rush that gave us the resources that we can use to flow over to this gentleman somewhat, and he will flow some real wisdom back in your direction. And I feel like I'm getting my money's worth. So that'll do it for this edition of the Virtue Signal. We'll see you here next time right here at BillWhittle.com.